My son bought his wife a house. And then gave me the mortgage documents. You've saved enough. It's time to help your family. I say no. They sued me for $400,000, and the judge asked me one question. The coffee cup froze halfway to my lips when Derek slid the mortgage documents across my kitchen table. $400,000. The number stared up at me like a slap in the face. Dad, you've saved enough, Derek said, his voice cold and matter-of-fact. It's time to help us. Kayla didn't even look up from her phone, scrolling through photos of granite countertops and marble bathrooms. Look at this master suite, babe. 3 walk-in closets. She finally glanced at me, her smile sharp as broken glass. Isn't it perfect for starting our family? I set my coffee down with deliberate calm. What exactly are you asking me to do? Cine, Derek said, tapping the papers with his index finger. Your credit score, our dream house. Win-win. The audacity hit me like a physical blow. I'd raised this boy, taught him the value of $1 earned through honest work. Now he sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd fed him countless meals on a plumber's salary, demanding I risk everything I'd saved. You're 65, Dad. What do you need all that money for anyway? Derek's eyes darted away from mine, focusing on the stack of papers instead. Kayla leaned forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Family helps family, Paul. That's what grandparents do. They invest in their children's future. Grandparents, I repeated slowly. Well, eventually, she waved her hand dismissively. Once we get settled in our new house, of course. I flipped through the mortgage application, seeing their combined income clearly listed. Derek made decent money as an IT specialist. Kayla worked part-time at a boutique, spending more than she earned on clothes and spa treatments. Together, they pulled in enough to afford a nice home. Just not this nice. You make $73,000 a year between you, I said, pointing to the income section. This mortgage payment would be $4,200 monthly. What bank approved this? Derek's Adam's apple bobbed. Dad, don't get caught up in the details. Details matter. I slid the papers back across the table. The answer is no. Silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Kayla's phone clattered onto the table. Excuse me. Her voice pitched higher, all pretense of sweetness gone. No, I won't co-sign for a house you can't afford. Derek's face wrinkled. Are you serious right now? After everything we've done, what have you done? The question came out sharper than I'd intended, but I was past caring about hurt feelings. Kayla stood up so fast her chair scraped against the linoleum. We visit you. We include you in our lives. We actually care about having a relationship with you, unlike some people's kids. Visiting isn't currency, Kayla. Oh, so now we know where we stand. Tears appeared in her eyes, the kind that came on command. I should have known you'd choose money over your own son's happiness. Derek finally met my eyes. And what I saw there made my chest tighten. Resentment. Entitlement. The boy who used to help me fix neighbors' leaky faucets for free was gone. Replaced by this stranger who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with legs. Dad, you owe us this. He said quietly. Those 5 words hit harder than a punch. I owe you all the sacrifices we've made. What sacrifices? Kayla grabbed her purse, her movements sharp and angry. Come on, Derek. We're wasting our time here. Derek hesitated, looking between his wife and me. For a moment, I hoped some fragment of the sun I'd raised might surface. Instead, he gathered the mortgage papers with shaking hands. You'll regret this, Dad. Kayla paused at the door, turning back with venom in her eyes. Don't expect us to keep pretending we want you around when you obviously don't give a damn about our future. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the spot where the papers had been. My coffee had gone cold, forming a thin skin on top. The house felt different somehow, smaller, emptier. I lost my son today, not to death or distance, but to greed and entitlement. Standing slowly, I walked to my study and pulled out a small notebook from the desk drawer. My phone was already ringing when I opened the notebook. Derek's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring through to voicemail, then watched as it immediately started again. On the 4th call, I answered, What, Derek? What? His voice cracked with disbelief. That's all you have to say? Do you have any idea what you just did? I could hear Kayla in the background, her voice a harsh whisper. Tell him about the inspection deadline. Tell him we'll lose the house. Dad, we have 48 hours to secure financing or we lose our deposit. $25,000 down the drain because you're being selfish. I'm being realistic. Realistic? Derek's laugh was bitter. You've got 6 figures sitting in retirement accounts you'll never spend. We're talking about our future here. The phone rustled and Kayla's voice came through sharp and clear. Paul, I'm sorry dear Eric's being so emotional. This is just really hard for us. Her tone had shifted to wounded and fragile. We've dreamed about this house for months. We've planned our whole future around it. Then you should have planned better. I don't understand why you hate me so much. The fake tears were back in her voice. I love your son. I want to give him the life he deserves on my dime. It's not like that. This is an investment in our family's future. Your grandchildren's future. I wrote down the time and date, then started transcribing their words as they spoke. Grandchildren that don't exist yet. Derek took the phone back. Dad, listen to me. We'll pay you back with interest. With what money? You can barely afford your current rent. Our salaries will increase. Will they? Is that guaranteed? Silence stretched for several seconds. Then Kayla grabbed the phone again. You know what, Paul? I'm done being nice. Dear Eric's too good to say this, but I'm not. You're a selfish old man who's going to die alone with all that money you're hoarding. Don't expect us to come running when you need us. The line went dead. I wrote down her exact words, then checked my voicemail. 3 messages, each more desperate than the last. I transcribed those too, noting the timestamps. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Dad, please reconsider. This house means everything to us. 2 minutes later, another'll do anything. Please. Then Kayla from her own phone. Paul, I said things I didn't mean. I was just upset. Can we start over? Dear Eric's crying. You're breaking your son's heart. Fine. Be that way, but don't come crying to us when you realize what you've lost. I screenshot each message, creating a digital folder on my computer labeled evidence. My phone rang again, this time, my sister, Linda. Paul, what's going on? Derek just called me sobbing, saying you refused to help them buy a house. That's right. Well, why? They're young. They need help getting started. Linda, did he tell you it's a $400,000 house? Pause. He said it was their dream home. Did he mention that I'd be co-signing a mortgage that's more than their annual income? Longer pause. Well, no, but did he explain that they've been living paycheck to paycheck despite making decent money? Paul, you don't have to be so harsh. I hung up and added her call to my log. Within an hour, my brother Mike called. Then my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, then dear Eric's old high school friend, Tommy. All with the same story. Dear Eric and Kayla were devastated. Couldn't understand why Dad was being so cruel. Each call got added to the log. My phone buzzed constantly through dinner. Text after text, alternating between dear Eric's guilt trips and Kayla's manipulation. Dad. We looked at cheaper houses, but they're all in bad neighborhoods. Paul, dear Eric hasn't eaten all day. He's making himself sick over this. You're choosing money over your own son. How does that feel? We'll never ask for anything else. This is it. One favor. I'm pregnant. That last message made me pause. I called Derek immediately. Kayla says she's pregnant. She might be. We haven't been to the doctor yet. Derek, is she pregnant or not? It's complicated, Dad. No, it's simple. Yes or no? Click. He hung up. 30 seconds later, a text from Kayla. False alarm about the pregnancy. Stress makes me late sometimes. I added that to the file, too, highlighting it in red. By 10 p.m., I'd received 47 text messages and 12 voicemails. Each one more desperate, more accusatory, or more manipulative than the last. They'd called everyone in my contact list, painting me as a miserly old man who cared more about money than family. But they'd also revealed their true selves in ways they didn't realize. The entitlement, the manipulation, the lies. It was all documented now. I turned off my phone, looked at my notebook filled with their own words, and closed it. Tomorrow would bring more of the same, but tonight I needed sleep. Sleep didn't come. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering the boy Derek used to be. The quiet house gave me space to think, to trace the path from that eager kid to the stranger who demanded my life savings. Derek at 10, standing on a milk crate in my workshop, tongue poking out in concentration as he learned to use a socket wrench. Dad, show me again how to tell if it's tight enough. His small hands, serious and careful, mimicking my movements. Exactly. Derek at 18, graduation day, valedictorian of his high school class, full scholarship to the State University for Computer Science. I'd sat in that auditorium, bursting with pride as he gave a speech about hard work and perseverance. My father taught me that anything worth having is worth working for, he'd said, looking right at me. Derek at 22, his first job interview. He'd called me afterward, voice shaking with excitement. Dad, they offered me $55,000 to start. Can you believe it? I'm actually going to make more than you ever did. No malice in those words, just joy and amazement. Back then, he'd understood the value of a dollar earned. The change started slowly after he met Kayla at a work conference in Chicago. She was everything Dear Eric wasn't. Confident, flashy, demanding. Within months, he was driving a leased BMW he couldn't afford, wearing expensive clothes, dining at restaurants that cost more than I'd spend on groceries in a month. Dad, you've got to live a little, he'd said when I'd expressed concern about his spending. Life's too short to pinch pennies forever. But it wasn't living. It was performing. Kayla had expensive tastes and expected Dear Eric to keep up. When his salary couldn't stretch to cover her expectations, the request started. Dad, I need help with rent this month. Just $500. My car repair wiped out my budget. That was the first one. I'd given it gladly, remembering my own tight months as a young man. Then it was car payments. The BMW's lease payment went up. Dad, can you spot me $800 until I get my Christmas bonus? Then credit cards. Kayla's having some medical issues. The insurance doesn't cover everything. Just $2,000 to get us through. Each time I'd helped. Each time Derek promised it was temporary. Each time Kayla had a story. Unexpected expenses. Dear Eric's job not paying enough. Temporary setbacks that somehow became permanent patterns. I tried giving advice instead of money. Son, maybe you should look at a cheaper apartment. Dear Eric's response had been immediate irritation. Dad, I don't need lectures. I need help. Have you considered budgeting classes? I'd suggested once. Kayla had laughed, actually laughed, and said, Paul, we're not living in the 1950s. People our age don't sit around counting pennies, but the pennies mattered. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. Working 60-hour weeks for 30 years, fixing other people's pipes and water heaters, saving every dollar I could. I'd wanted Dear Eric to understand that money represented time. My labor, my life. Instead, he saw it as something that appeared magically, something he was entitled to because we shared blood. The wedding had been the breaking point I should have recognized. Kayla wanted everything perfect. Designer dress, expensive venue, open bar for 200 guests. Dear Eric had asked me to pay for the photographer, then the flowers, then the honeymoon when their credit cards maxed out. Dad, it's a once-in-a-lifetime event, he'd pleaded. We can't skimp on our wedding. I'd paid $15,000 for one day of celebrating two kids who hadn't saved a dime for their own future. I'd watched Kayla direct the photographer like a movie star, demanding shot after shot until the man looked ready to collapse from exhaustion. 2 weeks later, they'd called from Hawaii in a panic. Their hotel bill was higher than expected. Their rental car had been damaged. They needed money for the flight home. Another $3,000. This is the last time, Dad. I promise. But of course, it wasn't. The requests kept coming, each with a new crisis, a new justification, a new promise that this would be the end of it. I'd enabled their irresponsibility, thinking I was helping my son, when really I was creating a monster. Derek had learned that Dad would always come through, always open his wallet, always choose family over financial sense. Now, they wanted $400,000. Not as a loan. They'd never actually repaid anything they'd borrowed. As a gift wrapped in the pretty paper of family obligation, the boy who'd learned to use tools in my workshop had become a man who saw me as nothing more than a tool himself, a means to an end, a way to get what he wanted without earning it. I got up from bed with new resolve, walking back to my study. The notebook lay open on the desk filled with today's documentation of their harassment campaign. I picked up my pen and started a new section, pattern of behavior, historical context. If they wanted to play hardball, they'd learn that this old plumber knew how to fight back. Dawn was breaking through my study windows when I opened the notebook with fresh determination. 40 years of fixing problems had taught me that the best way to stop a leak was to trace it to its source and shut off the supply. Time to turn off Dear Eric and Kayla's access to my money permanently. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I called First National Bank where Dear Eric had mentioned applying for the mortgage. Hi, this is Paul Flores. My son Derek applied for a home loan with you folks. As his potential co-signer, I'd like to understand the terms. The loan officer, Janet Hoffman, was helpful and thorough. Mr. Flores, I have to tell you, your son and daughter-in-law seem like lovely people, but this loan is aggressive given their debt-to-income ratio. What kind of debt are we talking about? Papers rustled on her end, credit cards, mostly about $47,000 in revolving debt between them. Car loans, student loans, their monthly obligations are already at 38% of gross income before adding this mortgage. $47,000 in credit card debt. They'd claimed to be financially responsible, just needing help with this one purchase. I wrote down every detail Janet shared. Next, I pulled up Derek's social media. Amazing what people revealed when they thought only friends were watching. Last month, photos from a weekend in Las Vegas. 3 weeks ago, Kayla's girls' trip to Miami, complete with first-class flight photos and 5-star hotel room shots. 2 weeks ago, Dear Eric's new gaming setup, easily $3,000 in equipment. But according to them, they couldn't afford groceries without help. I screenshot everything, creating a timeline of expensive purchases versus their claims of poverty. The evidence was damning. 2 people living far beyond their means, using credit cards to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford, then expecting me to bankroll their next financial fantasy. At 10 a.m., I called Morrison & Associates, the law firm that had handled my estate planning. Elizabeth Morrison had helped me set up my will and retirement accounts. She knew exactly what I had to protect. Paul, good to hear from you. What can I do for you? I explained the situation carefully, leaving out the emotional details and focusing on facts. Elizabeth listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions about Dear Eric's demands and threats. Let me make sure I understand, she said when I finished. Your son and his wife want you to co-sign a mortgage that would obligate you for $400,000 despite their existing debt and inability to afford the payments alone. That's correct. And when you refuse, they began a campaign of harassment and manipulation, claiming you owe them this assistance. Right. Again, Paul, you need to document everything. Every call, every text, every conversation. If this escalates legally, you'll need proof of their behavior. Already started. I flipped through my notebook. I've got yesterday's conversations transcribed, screenshots of text messages, a record of everyone they called to pressure me. Excellent. Now, here's what you need to know about your legal position. Elizabeth explained that oral promises meant nothing without proof, that children had no legal claim to their parents' money, and that co-signing a loan made me fully responsible for the debt if Derek defaulted. The most important thing is to get them to admit their true motivations on record. If they're claiming this is about family obligation rather than business, let them say so. If they're threatening to cut off contact unless you pay, document that, too. How do I get them on record? Minnesota is a one-party consent state for recording as long as you're part of the conversation. You can record without telling them. I set up a recording app on my phone before my next conversation with Derek. He called at noon. Right on schedule. Dad, I've been thinking about yesterday. I was upset. Said things wrong. I hit record. What things? Well, when I said you owed us, that came out wrong. I meant that family helps family, you know, so you don't think I owe you anything. Well, Dad, you've got all this money just sitting there. We're your only family. Who else is it going to go to? Maybe charity. Sharp intake of breath. Charity. You'd give our inheritance to strangers. Your inheritance. I kept my voice calm. Derek, I'm very much alive. That's not what I meant. Kayla's voice in the background. Tell him about the house. We need an answer today. Dad, we need to know by 5 p.m. The sellers won't wait. Then you should find financing you can actually afford. We can afford it. We just need you to co-sign because my credit score took a hit when Kayla was out of work last year. When was she out of work? Pause. It was a few months. Look, that's not the point. What's the point, Derek? The point is that parents help their children. That's what families do by risking their financial security. You won't be risking anything. We'll make every payment. With what money? Janet Hoffman says you're already carrying $47,000 in credit card debt. Dead silence. Then Kayla's voice clearer now. He called the bank. I told you he would. Dad, you're investigating us. Your own son. I'm protecting myself from a bad financial decision. This is unbelievable. I'm your son. Yes, you are. And I raised you better than this. The call ended with Derek hanging up on me. I stopped the recording and saved it to my evidence file, labeling it Derek admits expectation of inheritance confirms credit issues. My phone buzzed with a text from Kayla. We know what you're doing, Paul. You won't get away with this. I screenshot that, too, then typed back, get away with what? Protecting my retirement savings? Her response came immediately. Stealing our future. Dear Eric deserves that money more than some random charity. Screenshot. Another piece of evidence showing their true motivation. By evening, I had 18 recorded conversations, 43 text messages, and a comprehensive financial profile of Derek and Kayla's situation. They weren't just financially responsible. They were delusional about money, believing they deserved anything they wanted simply because they wanted it. I sat in my study reviewing the growing file of evidence, feeling something I hadn't felt since yesterday morning. Control. They thought I was a confused old man who could be bullied into submission. My phone buzzed with another demanding text from Kayla, but this time I smiled as I screenshot it. Another piece of evidence for the growing pile. The real battle was just beginning. My phone rang at 7 a.m. sharp. Margaret's name on the screen made my stomach tighten. My sister never called this early unless something was wrong. "Paul, I hope I'm not waking you." Her voice carried that careful tone she used when discussing family problems. I heard it during Dad's final illness, during Mom's funeral arrangements, during my divorce 20 years ago. "I'm up." "What's going on, Maggie?" "Well, I got a call from Derek last night. He was very upset." I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. "I'll bet he was. He says you refused to help them buy a house, that you have all this money sitting around and won't lift a finger for your own son." She paused. "Paul, that doesn't sound like you. Did he mention it was a $400,000 house, or that he wanted me to co-sign for a mortgage they can't afford?" Silence stretched between us. When Margaret spoke again, her voice was smaller. "He said it was their dream home, that you could easily afford to help but chose not to. Margaret, they make good money. They've just spent every penny on expensive toys and trips. Now they want me to risk my retirement so they can keep living beyond their means." "But Paul, he's your son." "Yes, he is. And I raised him to be responsible." Apparently, that didn't stick. After we hung up, I knew it was just the beginning. By noon, I'd gotten calls from my brother Mike, my cousin Janet, and 3 family friends, all with the same story. Dear Eric and Kayla were devastated. Couldn't understand why I was being so heartless, but it was social media where they really went to work. I didn't have Facebook, but my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, showed me Kayla's post when I ran into her at the mailbox. Her screen displayed a long, emotional essay about family betrayal and elderly selfishness. Kayla had written about their struggling young family being abandoned by Derek's wealthy father who refuses to share his blessings. The comments were brutal. People I'd known for decades calling me greedy and heartless. Some parents forget what family means. Money can't buy you love, but apparently it can buy you isolation. Mrs. Chen looked uncomfortable. "Paul, I don't understand what's happening. They want me to co-sign a mortgage I can't afford to help them pay." Her confusion was genuine. "But dear Eric drives that nice BMW. Didn't they just get back from Hawaii?" That afternoon, I went to Murphy's Hardware for light bulbs. Tom Murphy, who'd been cutting me deals for 15 years, barely looked up when I walked in. The usual friendly chat was replaced by cold efficiency. At the grocery store, Linda, the cashier, who always asked about Derek and his beautiful wife, rang up my items without a single word. When I tried to make conversation, she gave me a look that could freeze water. The whispers followed me everywhere. Coffee shop conversations that stopped when I approached. Former friends who suddenly found their shoes fascinating when we passed on the sidewalk. The whole town was hearing one side of the story, and that side painted me as a miserly old man hoarding wealth while his desperate children suffered. My phone buzzed constantly with screenshots from well-meaning relatives. Dear Eric had shared a photo of himself looking haggarded and defeated with the caption, "When your own father chooses money over family." Caleb posted pictures of modest apartments with comments about having to settle for less because some people value dollars over their own blood. But they made a critical error. Their story was too perfect, too coordinated. I started documenting everything. Screenshots, saved posts, recorded voicemails from confused family members. Each piece of evidence showed the same pattern. Emotional manipulation designed to pressure me into submission. When Dear Eric's high school friend, Tommy, called to lecture me about family loyalty, I asked him a simple question. "Tommy, do you think it's reasonable for a parent to risk their entire retirement to co-sign a mortgage their child can't afford?" Long pause. "Well, when you put it like that, that's exactly what Dear Eric asked me to do. $400,000 for a house he can't make payments on. But Derek said you had plenty of money." "I have enough for my retirement, not enough to bail out someone else's poor decisions." By evening, my documentation folder had grown substantially. Every social media post, every guilt-tripping message, every manipulative photo showed a clear pattern of calculated emotional warfare. I was sitting at my computer organizing the evidence when the certified letter arrived. The return address made my blood run cold. Brennan Walsh and Associates, attorneys at law. I signed for the envelope with steady hands, but my heart was hammering as I walked back to my kitchen table. The letter lay unopened in front of me while I researched the law firm on my computer. Brennan Walsh and Associates specialized in elder financial rights and family financial disputes. Their website featured testimonials from adult children who'd successfully sued elderly parents for promised financial support. My stomach dropped. Derek and Kayla hadn't chosen this firm randomly. They'd found lawyers who specialized in exactly what they were planning to do to me. I opened the letter with deliberate care. The formal language couldn't disguise the threat. Demand for meeting regarding financial obligations and family support commitments. They wanted me to come to their office to resolve this matter amicably before formal proceedings become necessary. I set the letter aside and opened my laptop. Time to understand exactly what I was dealing with. First stop, Derek's social media profiles. Amazing what people revealed when they thought only friends were watching. I scrolled through months of posts taking screenshots of everything. Dear Eric's gaming setup upgrade in February. Easily $4,000. Kayla's spa weekend in March, first-class flights, and 5-star resort photos, their Valentine's Day dinner at the most expensive restaurant in Minneapolis, complete with champagne and photos of $100 steaks. But 3 weeks ago, Dear Eric had posted about struggling to make ends meet and hoping family will help us get ahead. Next, I call their apartment complex. Hi, this is Paul Flores. My son Derek is a tenant in Unit 247. I'm thinking of helping him with his rent, but I want to understand his payment history. The manager, probably thinking I was a generous father, was helpful. Mr. Flores has been late on rent 4 times this year, currently 2 months behind, but we're working with them. 2 months behind on rent, but they'd taken a weekend trip to Las Vegas just last month. Their spending priorities were crystal clear. I dug deeper into public records. Dear Eric's car lease payments were $847 monthly for a BMW he didn't need. Kayla's credit card statements, visible through their shared financial planning app they'd foolishly made public, showed monthly charges at high-end boutiques, expensive restaurants, premium gym memberships. Their combined income was $73,000 annually. Their visible spending exceeded $85,000. They were living on credit, hoping I'd bail them out when it all collapsed. But the most revealing discovery came from Dear Eric's college friend, Mike, who called me directly. Mr. Flores. Mike Peterson. I knew Derek in school. Listen, I feel weird about this, but Dear Eric hit me up for money last month. Said his dad was being unreasonable about helping with bills. How much did he ask for? $3,000. Same story. Temporary setback. Would pay me back soon. But Mr. Flores, this is the 3rd time in 2 years. I wrote down every detail. Dear Eric and Kayla weren't just targeting me. They were working everyone they knew, spreading the same lies, playing the same victim card. By evening, I had a comprehensive picture of their financial manipulation. They had borrowed money from at least 6 people in the past year, always with soba stories about temporary hardship, never paying anyone back. They'd maxed out credit cards, maintaining a lifestyle they couldn't afford, then expected others to fund their irresponsibility. I called Elizabeth Morris and updated her on the situation. Paul, this is worse than family pressure. They're preparing to sue you. For what? I never promised them anything. They'll claim you made oral agreements to help with major purchases in Minnesota. That could theoretically be enforceable if they can prove it. But I didn't promise anything. I believe you. But they'll try to find witnesses, create a narrative of implied promises, maybe even claim you're suffering from age-related confusion. The strategy became clear. Attack my credibility. Claim I'd made promises I couldn't remember. Paint me as a confused elderly man who'd gone back on his word. The elder financial abuse specialist would know exactly how to frame their case. What do I do? Document everything? Record every conversation legally? Get witnesses to your actual statements? And Paul start thinking about this as war. They're not interested in family reconciliation anymore. I hung up and stared at my growing evidence file. Dozens of screenshots, recorded conversations, financial records, witness statements from people they tried to manipulate. They wanted to play legal hardball with a man who'd spent 40 years solving problems methodically. They had no idea what they'd started. My phone rang. Dear Eric's name flashed on the screen. I hit record and answered, "Hello, son. Dad, we need to talk. Can you come to the law office tomorrow at 2? We can work this out." What exactly are we working out? The money you owe us. The promises you made about helping family. What promises, Derek? Don't play games, Dad. You know what you said. No, I don't. Tell me exactly what I promised and when. Silence. Then Kayla's voice in the background. He's trying to trick you. Don't answer that. Dear Eric's voice returned shakier now. Just come to the meeting, Dad. 2 o'clock tomorrow. I'll be there. After I hung up, I saved the recording and added it to my evidence folder. Derek couldn't specify a single promise because no promises had ever been made. The next morning brought another certified letter. This one wasn't a request for a meeting. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. I sat at my kitchen table, the same spot where Dear Eric had first made his demands 3 weeks ago, and carefully opened the certified mail. Complaint for damages, Derek Flores and Kayla Flores versus Paul Flores. Amount demanded, $400,000 plus costs and attorney fees. My hand stayed steady as I read each accusation, but my anger grew with every word. They were claiming I'd made repeated oral promises to help with their major purchases. That I'd created reasonable expectations of financial support through my words and actions, that my sudden refusal constituted breach of contract and had caused them severe emotional and financial distress. The most outrageous claim came near the end. They were alleging I was suffering from age-related cognitive decline that made me forget promises made to family members and required court intervention to protect all parties involved. I set the papers down and called Elizabeth Morrison immediately. They filed suit. $400,000. I was afraid of that. Paul, can you come in this morning? We need to discuss strategy. An hour later, I sat in Elizabeth's office with the lawsuit spread across her conference table. This is aggressive, she said, scanning the documents. They're using every tactic available. Breach of oral contract, promissory estoppel, even hinting at elder abuse. Elder abuse? They're the ones trying to steal my retirement. That's the irony. But Paul, they've chosen their strategy carefully. They'll claim you made promises when witnesses were present. That you encouraged their house hunting. That your sudden refusal proves cognitive issues. What witnesses? I never promised them anything. Elizabeth pulled out a yellow pad. Let's go through this systematically. Did you ever say anything that could be interpreted as a commitment to help financially? I thought carefully. I said families should help each other, but I meant emotional support, advice, being there for each other. Were other people present sometimes? At Derek's birthday dinner last year, I made a toast about families sticking together. At Christmas, I said I wanted them to be happy and successful. They'll twist those statements, make them sound like financial commitments. The scope of their planning became clear. They've been building this case for months, maybe years. Every family gathering, every casual conversation, every expression of love for my son had been catalogued as potential evidence of financial promises. Elizabeth, they borrowed money from half a dozen people with sob stories about needing help. They're 2 months behind on rent, but just took a vacation to Vegas. Their social media shows luxury spending while they claim poverty. Her eyes lit up. That's our defense. We prove they have a pattern of financial manipulation and false claims. Your documentation becomes crucial evidence of their dishonesty. We spent 2 hours planning our response. Counterclaims for defamation, harassment, and abusive process. Discovery requests for their complete financial records, social media accounts, and correspondence with other people they'd borrowed money from. Paul, this will get expensive and ugly. They're betting you'll settle rather than fight. I thought about the boy Derek used to be helping me in the workshop, proud of honest work. Then I thought about the entitled stranger who demanded my life savings and was now trying to steal it through the courts. I'm not settling. I want everyone to know exactly what kind of people they are. Then we fight completely. Full discovery, character witnesses, financial analysis. We expose their pattern of manipulation and prove no promises were ever made. I signed the papers to formally respond and file counterclaims. The legal fees would be substantial, but my integrity was worth more than money. Elizabeth, I want to make sure the truth comes out publicly. I want their friends, family, everyone to see the evidence of what they've done. We'll file everything in public court records. Their financial irresponsibility, their lies, their attempts to manipulate you, it will all be documented. As I handed the signed papers back to her, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. Complete clarity about the fight ahead. They thought they could terrorize an old man into submission. They had no idea they just declared war on someone who'd spent a lifetime solving problems methodically, completely, and permanently. The gloves were coming off. Leaving Elizabeth's office, I drove to Murphy's Diner, where I've been having coffee for 20 years. Time to face the community with my head held high and the truth in my hands. Sarah, the waitress, who'd been cold to me recently, seemed uncertain when I walked in. She clearly heard Dirk and Kayla's version, but was too polite to be outright rude to a long-time customer. Coffee, Paul? Please, Sarah. And could I show you something? I pulled out copies of Derek's social media posts, the Vegas vacation photos, the expensive gaming setup, the luxury dinners, alongside his claims of poverty and need. Sarah's expression shifted as she looked at the timeline. Wait, he posted about struggling to pay rent the same week he was in Vegas. That's right. And here's his apartment manager's statement about being 2 months behind on payments. Her face hardened. Paul, I owe you an apology. When Kayla came in crying about how you wouldn't help family, I felt terrible for her. But this, she gestured at the evidence. This is different. Word spread quickly in a small community. By afternoon, I'd shown the documented evidence to Tom Murphy at the hardware store, Father McKenna at St. Mary's, and Helen the librarian. Each conversation was calm, factual, and devastating to Dear Eric and Kayla's narrative. I don't gossip, I told each person. But I thought you should see the actual facts. The beauty of truth is its consistency. Derek and Kayla's story had emotional appeal, but fell apart under scrutiny. My evidence told a clear, documented story that aligned with what people were beginning to notice themselves. Mrs. Chen stopped me at the mailbox that evening. Paul, I've been thinking about what we discussed. Derek drives a nicer car than my husband, and we're both still working. How exactly are they struggling? That's a good question, Dorothy. Maybe you should ask Kayla next time she posts about their poverty on Facebook. The social media backfire was spectacular. Kayla's emotional posts about family betrayal had initially gained sympathy, but people started fact-checking. Comments began appearing under her poverty claims. Weren't you just in Miami last month? That's a nice BMW Derek drives for someone who can't afford a house. Paul Flores has been nothing but generous to this community. Something doesn't add up here. Kayla tried doubling down with increasingly dramatic posts about elderly selfishness and broken promises, but her over-the-top victim narrative began working against her. People recognized manipulation when they saw it clearly. The grocery store provided the most satisfying validation. Linda, the cashier, who'd been giving me the cold shoulder, pulled me aside during checkout. Mr. Flores, I feel terrible about how I treated you, but after seeing those Facebook posts side by side with Derek's vacation photos, well, I have eyes. No harm done, Linda. People were given incomplete information. My daughter pointed out that Dear Eric's gaming computer costs more than I make in 2 months, and he's claiming he can't afford groceries. The isolation Derek and Kayla had tried to impose on me was reversing rapidly. Former supporters started distancing themselves, asking uncomfortable questions about the discrepancies between their claims and their lifestyle. I ran into Dear Eric's former boss at the gas station. Paul Dear Eric came by asking for money last week. Said his father was being unreasonable about a small loan, but the lawsuit papers are public record now. $400,000 isn't exactly small. No, it isn't. Makes a man wonder what else wasn't exactly truthful in that conversation. The beauty of my approach was its restraint. I never attacked Dear Eric and Caleb personally, never called them liars or thieves. I simply presented documented facts and let people draw their own conclusions. The evidence spoke louder than any emotional appeal. By the end of the week, the shift in community opinion was dramatic. People who'd initially sympathized with the struggling young couple were now questioning everything they've been told. Derek and Kayla's support network wasn't just eroding, it was actively turning against them. My phone rang at 8 p.m. Dear Eric's name on the screen, but his voice was shaky when I answered. Dad, can we meet somewhere private? Just the two of us? The confidence was gone. The entitled demands had been replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. What did you have in mind? Maybe coffee corner tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. I think we need to work something out. I smiled knowing he couldn't see it. The lawsuit had been filed. The community had seen the evidence, and their house of lies was collapsing around them. I'll be there, Derek. The boy who thought he could intimidate his father with lawyers and social pressure was about to learn that truth has a way of winning in the end. Derek's voice barely sounded like my son anymore. The confident entitlement had cracked, replaced by something that sounded dangerously close to panic. Coffee corner, Dad. 10 a.m., please. I sat in my study, noting how he dropped the demands and threats. I'll be there, Derek. But when I arrived at the small cafe the next morning, Dear Eric was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he'd chosen Riverside Park, the same place I'd taught him to ride a bike 25 years ago. He sat hunched on a bench, looking older than his 35 years. Dad. He stood up quickly, nervously. Thanks for coming. The expensive clothes were still there, but they couldn't hide the stress lines around his eyes or the way his hands shook slightly when he gestured. This wasn't the arrogant young man who demanded my retirement savings 3 weeks ago. You look tired, Derek. Yeah, well. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Things have been complicated lately. We sat on opposite ends of the bench where I'd once pushed him on swings. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dad, I think this whole thing has gotten out of hand. I waited. Let him talk. The lawsuit, the lawyers, all this drama. Maybe we can work something out. You know, just between us. What kind of workout? Derek's Adam's apple bobbed. If we drop the lawsuit, maybe you could help us with something smaller. Not the whole house, but maybe a down payment, 20, 30,000. The negotiation tactics were pathetic. Start high, get rejected, come back with a smaller demand, and hope it seems reasonable by comparison. Derek, where's Kayla? His face tightened. She didn't want me to meet with you. Said it showed weakness. What do you think? I think I'm drowning, Dad. The words came out strangled. Our credit cards are maxed. The car payment's 3 months behind. The legal fees alone are killing us. I pulled out my phone and hit record. Tell me about your financial situation, son. Why are you? He stopped, seeing the phone. Are you recording me? Yes. For my protection. Dear Eric stared at the device, then seemed to deflate completely. We owe $47,000 on credit cards. The BMW lease is $1,200 a month. I lied about the payment. Kayla's spending it's out of control, but I can't seem to stop her. The admissions poured out like water from a broken pipe. The Vegas trip had cost $8,000 they didn't have. Kayla's shopping addiction had emptied their savings twice in the past year. They borrowed money from 6 different people with lies about temporary hardships. We never thought you'd fight the lawsuit, Derek said, his voice hollow. Our lawyer said most elderly people settle rather than go through the stress of court. Your lawyer was wrong. Dad, the discovery process, they want our complete financial records, social media accounts, everything. When people see what we actually spend versus what we claimed, he buried his face in his hands. We're going to be completely exposed. The boy who'd once helped me fix leaky faucets was admitting to systematic fraud and manipulation. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger anymore, but a kind of clinical detachment. Derek, did you really think I'd made promises to pay for your house? Long pause. Kayla said you did. She said, when you talked about family helping family, you were making commitments. And what do you think now? I think he looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I think I've been an idiot. I think I let my wife convince me to destroy my relationship with my father for money we never deserved. The admission should have moved me. A month ago, it might have. Now it just sounded like another manipulation attempt. What do you want from me, Derek? I want to take it all back. The lawsuit, the things we said about you, the whole mess. Can we just forget this ever happened? I stood up from the bench, looking down at my son. No, Derek, we can't. But, Dad, the lawsuit changed everything. You accused me in court documents of cognitive decline, breach of contract, elder abuse. You tried to steal my retirement savings through legal fraud. His face crumpled. I was desperate. So was I, Derek. Desperate to understand how I raised a son who could do this to his own father. I walked away, leaving him on the bench where I'd once taught him to be honest, to work hard, to treat people with respect. All lessons he'd apparently forgotten. Driving home, I felt empty rather than victorious. The scared young man in the park bore little resemblance to the confident boy I'd raised. But it wasn't my job to rescue him from consequences he'd earned. Pulling into my driveway, I noticed a familiar car parked across the street. Kayla sat behind the wheel, watching my house with the intensity of a predator. Our eyes met through her windshield, and the hatred in her stare was pure and undiluted. I went inside and called Elizabeth Morrison to report the surveillance. 2 days after Kayla's surveillance, I received the court notice. The hearing was set for Thursday morning. Judge Patricia Henley presiding. I spent Monday organizing my evidence files one final time. Every screenshot, every recorded conversation, every piece of financial documentation was labeled, indexed, and ready for presentation. Elizabeth had been amazed by the thoroughness of my preparation. Paul, in 30 years of practice, I've never seen a plaintiff with better documentation. They walked into a trap of their own making. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, matching the seriousness of what lay ahead. I dressed in my best suit, the one I'd worn to Dear Eric's college graduation, and arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early. Derek and Kayla were already there, huddled with their attorney near the metal detectors. Kayla wore an expensive black dress that probably cost more than some people made in a week. Derek's suit looked new and tailored. They were still playing the part of successful young professionals even as their financial world collapsed around them. Their lawyer, James Brennan, was a slick-looking man in his 40s with perfectly styled hair and an expensive briefcase. He'd built his reputation on these family financial disputes, convincing elderly parents to settle rather than face public embarrassment. He was about to learn that not all elderly parents were easily intimidated. Mr. Forrest. Judge Henley called the courtroom to order with crisp efficiency. She was a stern woman in her 50s, known for having little patience with frivolous lawsuits. Brennan stood to present Derek and Kayla's case. His voice was smooth, practiced, designed to evoke sympathy for his young clients who had been betrayed by broken family promises. Your Honor, my clients have documented evidence of repeated verbal commitments from the defendant to assist with major family purchases. Mr. Derek Flores will testify that his father explicitly promised to help with their first home purchase, creating reasonable expectations of support. Derek took the stand, his voice shaky as he recounted conversations that had never happened. According to his testimony, I'd made specific promises at family dinners, birthday celebrations, and holiday gatherings to make sure they got their dream house. It was complete fiction, and I watched the judge's expression grow skeptical as Derek stumbled through his rehearsed lies. Kayla's testimony was worse. She sobbed dramatically about their broken dreams and elderly betrayal, claiming I'd encouraged them to look at expensive houses because I committed to helping with the purchase. Mr. Flores told us repeatedly that family takes care of family, she said through fake tears. He said our happiness was his priority and that he had more money than he could ever spend. Judge Henley's expression remained neutral, but I caught her making notes during the most emotional portions of Kayla's performance. Then it was Elizabeth's turn. Your Honor, the defendants have prepared a comprehensive response to these allegations supported by extensive documentation. I took the stand and calmly recounted the actual events. No dramatic emotions, no theatrical gestures, just facts, dates, and recorded conversations. Elizabeth presented our evidence systematically. Derek's social media posts showing luxury spending while claiming poverty. Credit card statements revealing their true financial situation. Recorded phone calls where they admitted their manipulative strategies. The courtroom was dead silent as my recording of Derek played, "We never thought you'd fight the lawsuit." Our lawyer said most elderly people settle rather than go through the stress of court. Brennan objected repeatedly, but the recordings were legal and the evidence was devastating. The financial timeline was particularly damning. While claiming they couldn't afford groceries, Derek and Kayla had spent $43,000 on luxury purchases in the past year. Judge Henley reviewed the evidence with growing incredulity. When Elizabeth finished the presentation, the judge leaned forward and asked the question that ended everything. Mr. Brennan, where's the written documentation of this alleged promise, any contract, any written agreement, any documented proof that your client was guaranteed $400,000? Brennan stammered. Your Honor, many family agreements are verbal. I'm not asking about family agreements. I'm asking about written proof of a specific promise to provide $400,000 for a house purchase. Silence. There is none, Your Honor. Judge Henley's expression hardened. So, you're asking this court to order an elderly man to pay $400,000 based entirely on the testimony of two people who, according to the evidence presented, have systematically lied about their financial situation, manipulated family members, and attempted to defraud their own father. The courtroom was electric with tension. Derek and Kayla looked like deer caught in headlights. Your Honor, I request a brief recess to consult with my clients. Granted, 15 minutes. As the judge left the bench, Elizabeth leaned over to whisper in my ear, "We've won, Paul, completely." But I wasn't watching my lawyer's celebration. I was watching Derek's complete breakdown as reality finally hit him. Judge Henley returned to the bench with an expression that could have frozen fire. Derek and Kayla sat rigid in their seats, their expensive clothes now seeming like costumes in a play that had gone horribly wrong. I've reviewed all evidence presented in this case, Judge Henley began, her voice carrying the weight of final judgment. This court finds the plaintiff's claims to be not only without merit, but actively fraudulent. Derek's face went white. Kayla gripped the table so hard her knuckles showed through her skin. The evidence presented by the defendant demonstrates a clear pattern of financial manipulation, deliberate misrepresentation, and attempted fraud. The plaintiffs have provided no credible evidence of any promise, written or verbal, to provide $400,000 for a home purchase. The judge's voice grew sharper. Furthermore, the evidence shows that the plaintiffs maintained expensive lifestyles while claiming poverty, borrowed money from multiple sources under false pretenses, and systematically attempted to manipulate elderly family members for financial gain. I sat perfectly still, feeling a deep satisfaction as justice unfolded exactly as it should. The plaintiff's lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. The defendant's counterclaims for defamation, harassment, and abuse of process are granted in full. Brennan tried to speak. Your Honor, if we could, I'm not finished, Counselor. Judge Henley's tone could have cut steel. The court awards the defendant full reimbursement of legal fees in the amount of $28,300 plus court costs and punitive damages of $15,000 for the emotional distress caused by this frivolous action. Derek made a choking sound. $43,000 they didn't have on top of their existing legal fees. Additionally, the judge continued, this court is referring this case to the state attorney's office for investigation of potential perjury charges. Lying under oath is a felony, and this court does not tolerate fraud. Kayla burst into tears. Real ones this time, not the manufactured emotion she had displayed earlier. Dear Eric sat motionless, staring straight ahead like a man watching his life collapse in real time. Finally, the court issues a restraining order prohibiting the plaintiffs from contacting the defendant directly or through third parties, from approaching his residence, and from making any further public statements about this matter. Judge Henley looked directly at Derek and Kayla. You attempted to use this court system to steal from your own family member. You have disgraced yourselves, wasted taxpayer resources, and committed perjury in my courtroom. I hope the consequences serve as a lesson about the difference between legal action and legalized theft. The gavel came down with finality. In the hallway outside the courtroom, reporters had gathered. Word of the dramatic case had spread through the community. Derek and Kayla hurried past them with their heads down, but several people I recognized from town were waiting to talk to me. Mr. Flores, how do you feel about the verdict? Asked Jenny from the local newspaper. I thought carefully before answering. I feel that justice was served today. Family relationships should be built on love and respect, not financial manipulation. I hope this sends a message that elderly people won't be intimidated by threats or lawsuits from people who want something for nothing. Mrs. Peterson from down the street approached me with tears in her eyes. Paul, I'm so sorry. I believe their lies. I should have known better. No harm done, Helen. People were given incomplete information. Derek appeared suddenly beside me. His face, desperate. Dad, please, can we talk? I know I made mistakes. I looked at my son, this stranger, wearing Derek's face, and felt nothing but tired sadness. You heard the judge, Derek. There's a restraining order. Don't violate it. I walked past him without another word, Elizabeth at my side, and stepped into the bright sunshine outside the courthouse. Behind me, I could hear Kayla's voice rising in fury. This isn't over. We'll appeal. Will Brennan's sharp response cut her off. You'll do nothing. You're lucky you're not being arrested right now. I drove home slowly, taking the long route past the house dear Eric and Kayla could no longer afford. A bright red for sale sign had appeared in the front yard, probably posted that morning after the hearing. I didn't slow down, but I allowed myself a small smile. Justice served. My driveway had never felt more welcoming. I sat in my car for several minutes watching my house, my sanctuary that dear Eric and Kayla had tried to take from me through legal theft. The afternoon sun made the windows glow golden, and everything felt peaceful in a way it hadn't for months. My phone buzzed constantly with congratulatory messages. The courthouse victory had spread through Mono faster than news of a lottery winner. Sarah from the diner. Paul, so proud of how you handled this. Takes real courage to stand up for what's right. Tom Murphy, coffee's on the house for life. You showed this town what integrity looks like. Father McKenna, justice served with dignity. Your parents would be proud. By evening, I'd received over 40 messages from friends, neighbors, and even strangers who'd heard about the case. The community that dear Eric and Kayla had briefly turned against me was now firmly in my corner, and they were angry at being manipulated. Mrs. Chen stopped by with a casserole. Paul, I felt so foolish for believing their story, but watching you handle this with such class, you're an inspiration. The long-term consequences for Derek and Kayla became clear over the following weeks. Their house went into foreclosure within days of the court judgment. The BMW was repossessed. Their social media accounts disappeared entirely, probably to avoid the comments from people who now knew the truth. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned they'd moved in with Kayla's parents in North Dakota, completely humiliated and financially destroyed. Dear Eric had lost his job. His employer didn't appreciate the negative publicity from the perjury investigation, the legal fees, court-ordered damages, and complete destruction of their credit meant they'd be recovering from this disaster for years. They'd gambled everything on intimidating an old man and lost spectacularly. Did I feel guilty about dear Eric's consequences? Not for a moment. Every misfortune that befell them was the direct result of choices they'd made. I hadn't destroyed their finances. I'd simply refused to bail them out of their own irresponsibility. The broader lessons of the experience settled into my consciousness like sediment after a storm. Truth really does triumph over manipulation, but only if you're willing to fight for it. Dignity and principle are worth defending even when the cost seems high. Family loyalty must be earned through respect and reciprocated. It can't be demanded through guilt or threats. Most importantly, I'd learned that saying no to family members who want to exploit you isn't cruelty. It's necessary boundary setting that protects everyone involved. My life moved forward with a lightness I hadn't felt in years. The stress of wondering when dear Eric would make his next financial demand was gone permanently. The community respect I'd earned through this ordeal was deeper than anything I'd experienced before. New friendships formed with people who'd watched me handle the situation with integrity. My church asked me to speak to their senior group about protecting themselves from financial manipulation. The local newspaper wrote an editorial about my case, calling it a textbook example of how truth and patience triumph over lies and greed. 3 months after the court victory, I was working in my garden when Elizabeth Morrison called with news. Paul, Derek, and Kayla's lawyer has been sanctioned by the state bar for knowingly filing a frivolous lawsuit. And the district attorney has decided to prosecute them for perjury. I continued planting tomato seedlings as she spoke. The earth was rich and dark, perfect for growing healthy things while removing harmful weeds. What's the likely outcome? Probation, community service, and permanent criminal records. Nothing that will send them to jail, but enough to ensure everyone knows what they attempted to do. After hanging up, I sat back on my heels, surveying the neat rows of plants that would feed me through the summer and into fall. The garden was a perfect metaphor for life. Nurture what's healthy, remove what's harmful, and trust that good things will grow from patient effort. Derek had been like a weed in my garden, choking out peace and draining resources meant for healthy growth. Removing him had been painful, but necessary. My phone rang. Another friend calling to check on me, invite me to dinner, or just share conversation. The community that had briefly shunned me now embraced me more warmly than ever. I was finally free to be the man I'd always been. Honest, hardworking, generous with people who deserved it, and absolutely unwilling to reward greed or manipulation. The sun was setting over my garden, painting everything in golden light. Tomorrow I'd plant the second row of vegetables, tend the flowers, and continue building the peaceful life I'd earned through a lifetime of honest work. Justice served, family protected, truth victorious. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought with the people closest to you. But sometimes those battles are exactly what's needed to protect everything that matters. I was at peace.